After 3 games in a row, there's been a lot of criticism of Team USA and USA Basketball, because the games have been close and, people expect Team USA to run away with all of these games. And some of the criticism has been the style of play. And so juxtaposing how Team USA plays with, kind of stagnant ball, a lot more dribbling, some ISOs, versus a team like Serbia with a lot of player and ball movement, making the next pass, and the ball moves crisply side to side. And same with Australia to a certain extent, with the ball moving from player to player as opposed to sticking in somebody's hands. And I've talked about this a little bit in terms of, referencing Saba, but the way that the team is selected, you have a lot of players who are used to playing with the ball in their hands. And, the assumption is that if you take a really good player and you put them in a situation where they have to move off the ball, it's going to be an easy transition because that's, easier than playing with the ball, or less pressure, or, less demands, whatever the case may be. But essentially we're expecting players to adapt personalities and behaviors and skills that they rarely use or exhibit during their NBA season. And so you take a player who's 4 or 5, 8 years into their NBA career, and they're used to having the ball in their hands all the time. They're the go-to player. Every play that the team runs is to get them the ball in a certain position. And then even going back in college, they were likely the best player. They had the ball in their hands most of the time. Most of the plays were run to get them the ball. Probably back to AAU in high school, the same thing. And so now you're expecting them to play off the ball and to be able to move. And that's one of the reasons why, somebody like Klay Thompson was effective today, because he's one of the few players on Team USA that really is an off-the-ball player. And with the Warriors, he plays off, Curry and Draymond Green. Even going back to Washington State, he's a player that spent a lot of time coming off screens, catching and shooting, as opposed to getting the ball, making a lot of, triple threat ISO type moves. And so we just expect players to be able to move from one role to the next and to adopt these different behaviors and these different skills without a lot of practice time, because the team is put together fairly late because of the NBA playoffs and so on and so forth. And I think this, to some respect, is an unfair expectation that we can take a player who's been a dominant ball handler, ball dominant type player, and say, okay, now you're in this role where you're going to play off the ball, and we expect you to make great cuts, great timing, et cetera, which isn't that player's skill set. So if USA Basketball wanted a team that played with a little bit more ball movement and player movement, they would need to bring players that bring that type of skill set, to the team, and leave home some of the ball dominant players. So maybe have somebody like a Kyle Korver, who's great moving off the ball, or a JJ Redick, who's great moving off the ball, instead of one of the, ball dominant wings, off the bench. Maybe somebody like DeMar DeRozan. And if you incorporate some more of these players who are used to moving without the ball and used to keeping the ball moving and making the next pass, and the play in the Warrior system or the Spurs system or the Hawk system, which is kind of derived from the Spurs system, and so they're used to playing in this way, then maybe you would have that type of play during international competition. But short of that, the team plays the way it does because those are the players that are on the team. And it may be an indictment of the way that U.S. players develop, or it may just be the fact that there's 30 teams in the NBA, whereas most European leagues have a lower number of teams, and so there's a lot more players who are the ball dominant superstars on their teams as opposed to in European leagues, and so there's this depth of talent in the U.S. And so by picking the best player from all these teams and putting them together, as an all-star team, that doesn't always translate to the best, performance as a team in a singular competition. And so, to me, it doesn't necessarily say anything about the way players develop or the way, the system is, good or bad. To me, it says more about the players that are on the team and are lack of appreciation for the skills the players have off the ball. And so, we recognize the skills the players have on the ball, in terms of dribbling, passing, shooting, but we underestimate the difficulty of learning and exhibiting the skills off the ball, such as moving without the ball, spacing, reading cuts, timing of cuts, how to set up screens, things of this nature. We just expect players to learn those, and we underestimate the fact that players who haven't been asked to do these types of skills for a number of years in their professional career can just automatically do them when put in that situation. So to me, that's what the performance of USA basketball is showing right now. It's nothing necessarily about the development of players, although it probably has a little bit to do with that, but more it has to do with our underestimating the difference between being an on-ball player and an off-ball player, and our lack of appreciation for the development of those off-ball skills.